Welcome to Barbara's Bulletin, the podcast where we bring you the latest news and updates from around the world. I'm your host, Barbara, and I'm glad you're joining us today. We're starting off with a story that's been making headlines in recent days. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been a long-standing issue, with both sides experiencing violence and unrest. In a recent development, a U.S. immigration judge has ruled that Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian graduate student at Columbia University, can be deported due to his pro-Palestinian activism. Khalil, a permanent U.S. resident, was arrested on March 8 and flown to a detention center in Louisiana, away from his legal team and his pregnant wife. The Trump administration claims that Khalil's involvement in anti-Gaza war protests makes him a threat to national security, despite not charging him with any crimes. Khalil's lawyers argue that the ruling is a charade of due process and that the administration is using immigration law to silence dissent. They plan to appeal the decision, and federal judges in New York and New Jersey have blocked Khalil's deportation while reviewing his claim that the arrest violated his First Amendment rights. This case has drawn national attention, with critics warning of violations of the right to free speech. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has stated that the Trump administration has revoked the visas of hundreds of people allegedly tied to pro-Palestinian university protests. In related news, the Israeli military has been accused of targeting medical workers and aid agencies in Gaza, with hundreds of medical workers and staff killed over the past 18 months. Human rights organizations have long accused the Israeli military of a culture of impunity, with few soldiers ever facing justice. We'll continue to follow this story and provide updates as more information becomes available. It's a complex issue with many different perspectives, and we'll strive to bring you balanced and fair reporting. In other news, there are reports of a recent incident in which Israeli forces attacked clearly marked vehicles belonging to the charity World Central Kitchen, resulting in the deaths of 7 members. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society has called for an international investigation into the incident. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. We're halfway through our show, and we've got a lot more to cover. Let's dive into our middle segment, where we'll be discussing some of the latest news from around the world. We start with a story out of Japan, where the ruling coalition is divided over a potential consumption tax cut. The Liberal Democratic Party and its coalition partner, Komeito, are at odds over how to best address inflation and U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policy. Some lawmakers are pushing for a consumption tax cut ahead of this summer's upper house election, while others, including LDP Secretary General Hiroshi Moriyama, are advocating for a cash handout instead. In other news, the Japanese government is also considering a reduction in the consumption tax rate as part of its economic stimulus package. This move is seen as an effort to boost consumer spending and mitigate the effects of inflation. However, some experts warn that cutting the consumption tax could have unintended consequences, such as reducing revenue for Social Security programs. Moving on to international news. U.S. President Donald Trump has been making headlines with his comments on the world order. Analysts warn that his disregard for international law and state sovereignty could lead to a return to an era of great power politics, where strong nations impose their will on weaker ones. This has significant implications for global stability and security. In economic news, Argentina has reached a deal with the International Monetary Fund worth $20 billion, which includes measures to ease currency controls and support the country's economic program. The agreement is seen as a positive step towards stabilizing Argentina's economy, but some critics argue that it may not be enough to address the country's underlying structural issues. Finally, in a surprising move, a Brazilian man will face a jury trial for the murder of his wife and child in Japan. The case has garnered significant attention due to its complexity and the fact that it will be tried in a Japanese court. That's all for our middle segment. We've covered a range of stories from around the world, from politics and economics to international relations and crime. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. We're wrapping up today's show with a significant development in international diplomacy. Talks between Iran and the United States have commenced in Oman, with Tehran seeking an initial understanding on its nuclear program. This marks a crucial step forward in negotiations, as both countries attempt to find common ground after years of tension. According to reports, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated that the discussions could lead to a path of negotiations if the U.S. negotiators demonstrate sufficient will. Iran is seeking a fair and honorable agreement from a position of equality. The U.S. delegation, led by President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will likely push for Tehran to adhere to stricter nuclear guidelines and address concerns about its regional influence. It's essential to note that these talks are taking place amidst a complex geopolitical landscape. Iran has been breaching restrictions imposed by the existing nuclear deal since the U.S. withdrew from the agreement in 2015. The country has stockpiled enough highly enriched uranium to make several bombs, sparking concerns among Western nations. As we analyze this development, it's crucial to consider the perspectives of both parties. Iran insists its nuclear activities are entirely peaceful, while the U.S. and its allies remain skeptical. The success of these talks will depend on the ability of both sides to find mutually acceptable solutions and build trust. In a sign that Iran may be preparing for a potential breakthrough, the country is reportedly reviewing its potential accession to 2 United Nations-backed treaties aimed at combating money laundering and terrorism financing. Additionally, the National Iranian Oil Company will host a conference later this month to present billions in oil and gas investment opportunities, which could attract capital to key energy projects. As we conclude today's segment, it's clear that these talks are a significant step towards resolving the long-standing tensions between Iran and the U.S. However, the path forward will be complex and require careful negotiation. We'll continue to monitor developments and provide updates as more information becomes available. That's all for today's Barbara's Bulletin. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay engaged.